Hello everyone and welcome to Calls. This is the 2022 Pebble Beach Pro-Am Data Dive Show. Apologies for the bit of a late start, getting a lot of things set up here as well as editing last night's video and the fumble of an intro. So hopefully I don't do that again. We can get through it. A lot to get into. Great show planned. I'm excited. A lot of data to get into. It gives me a chance to nerd out. So let's not waste any time. All statistics tonight are provided by FantasyNational.com. Amazing resource. I say it every single show. Go check it out. It's well worth the investment. The description has links to my social media as well as an email to get a hold of me if you want to be a part of bonus content. And then social media is where I place my betting cards for the week as well as interesting stuff that I find through research, leading up to the tournament and through the tournament. And then lastly, chat is open. It's live. Jump in there. I want to hear about any bets that you've already made, any early leans you're leading for DFS. I want to hear about all that. So let's not waste any more time and dig into the data for the 2022 Pebble Beach Pro-Am. And we start, as I transition over here, hopefully the camera will focus in here. There we go. The tournament fact sheet came out tonight. That was part of the things I was getting gathered for the show tonight. So I don't see a lot of difference from last year's. Still a par 72. I think they have lengthened this a little bit. I would have to check the show from last night, but I believe it was listed at 68, 70 something. So this is closer to 7,000, still a very short course. Fairways, same about, roughly the same amount. The greens are still small. The greens are still POA. Changes to the course since last year: renovation of 11, lowering of the front lip on the 12th bunker, expansion of approach. So you can see all of that changes here. Looks like they have done quite a bit of renovating and such. Be interesting to see. Looks like there's about 100 yards added, give or take. Let me make sure chat is up and going. So that's Pebble Beach. That's the two rounds for guys who make the cut. But it's the course we're going to be focusing on. Remember, this is a 3 course and 54 hole cut. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday, each of the players will play Pebble Beach, Spyglass Hill, and Monterey one time, and those who make the cut will play Pebble Beach on Sunday. Again, I don't see anything too much different from Spyglass. Again, short course, par 72. Greens are still 5,000 square feet like they were last night. POA at Monterey. So that's why we're going to spend a whole lot of time diving into last week's putting stats at the Farmers. Typical, success on POA. See if we can find any outliers and such. As well as, a lot of short course metrics. All of these 3 courses are right at or a little over 7,000 yards. So it's short courses. And then Pebble Beach is always pretty tough. Spyglass Hill and Monterey are generally pretty easy. That's why you see such low cut lines, roughly about -5, -6, with winners typically around 18 to 19, give or take. So anytime an updated tournament fact sheet comes out on Monday, I will always begin the show with that, or at least the Data Dive show with that. But I don't see anything massively different. Again, you can pause the show, pause the video if you want to read all of these changes here. With that, let's go to Fantasy National, as that's where the meat and potatoes, as they say. Sorry, let me exit out of that. Meat and potatoes of our show. We'll recap a couple of things. We mentioned last night strokes gained total of just the last 6 months for just overall coming into the tournament. Patrick Cantlay, Seamus Power, Will Zalatoris, Mac Hughes, Cameron Tringali, McCarthy, Berger, Hoagie, McNeely, Rogers, and Rose. And yes, that's 11 players, but Rogers and Rose are tied for 10th. We looked at POA putting. I think specifically we looked at last week's POA. And yeah, this is all last week's POA performance. I'm going to keep it in the ranking tonight. We did look at some specific values when I was fumbling around figuring out that Luke List wasn't in the tournament this week. So Wyndham Clark put the daylights out, Piercy, Pat Perez, Cook, Day. And that's what we did last night. So let's take a broader view. This right now I have the last 6 months. Let's do the last 12. Let's do the last 12 months. This will take us back to last year's, I'm hoping, Farmers. We'll just do all records, I suppose. We'll see how far back this goes. Because POA is not very common. So even though we're going back to 2018 here, let's do last 24 just to see. And we'll limit it to the last 2 years. That should give us a decent little sample here. 24 rounds, that goes back to the 2020 AT&T Pro-Am, then the Genesis. This looks pretty good. So let's do the last 2 years. And again, I'm doing 2 years only because POA is so very unique, not very common, all that stuff. So your top performers on POA surfaces in the past 2 years: Matt Kuchar, Wyndham Clark, Kevin Kisner, Bryce Garnett, and Maverick McNeely are the top 5, followed by Brian Stewart, Jonas Blix, Brandon Hagee, Mark Hubbard, and Troy Merritt. Daniel Berger is also tied for 10th with Merritt. But let's compare that to how it shook out last week. Wyndham Clark, I know, led the field in strokes gained putting. Daniel Berger normally is not a good putter, but apparently he is on POA, and he had a very good performance last week. So Wyndham Clark, let's see, Bryce Garnett, McNeely, let's see where these guys finished up. This is last year's Pebble Beach. Let's make this easy. Let's just click Wyndham Clark and go to the Farmers and strokes gained. So now we'll just go back and forth from here to Fantasy National's kind of homepage. So you got Wyndham Clark gained 6.7. He was the leader in the field. You notice that he is second best over the course of the past 2 years. So that's not an outlier. Kisner, Garnett, McNeely. Let's see. McNeely here. He's in the top 12, 15. So that's not an outlier performance. Chad Ramey, I believe, was up here. Yeah, he's a little bit further down. He's only got the 3 rounds from this past weekend. Berger, who played last week and is in the field this week, he's pretty right under Maverick McNeely. So that doesn't seem like to be an outlier performance. Hey, what's up, Josh? How you doing? Thanks for tuning in. How was this past week with the Farmers? Did you hit it big? I'm hoping you joined in the success with Luke List. So yeah, it doesn't look like, if you're a good putter on POA, it looks like you're just good on POA. So doesn't seem to be too many high outliers here. Stewart, I think Garnett played last week. So let's check Garnett just to make sure. He actually had a pretty bad putting week. Let's see if, so that looks like a bad putting performance, and it happens because putting is clearly his best. He's generally a good putter. He just had a bad putting week last week. So generally speaking, and I don't want to put a blanket blanket statement on this, but it looks like if you're a good putter on POA, you're a good, you're going to perform. Faded list because of ownership. I got to do the cut. Nice. Yeah. Damon, not so good. I didn't use list much in DFS. I actually had the outright win ticket on him at 70-1. So that was my exposure to Luke List, and I was pretty happy about it. If he cost me some money in DFS, I more than made up for it, so I was okay with it. We took a look at some short course metrics last night. Let's do that as well. Just kind of recap and bring us into some metrics for tonight. Let's go in the last 12 months because I'm not sure how many short courses there are. Let's see if 36 rounds will do it though. Yeah, 36 rounds. Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, I was touting Luke List all last week, so I was pretty happy with that hit. I knew Zalatoris was going to be good. He was my, not necessarily one and done, but I give my subscribers a little tournament fact sheet, and if you're wanting to be a part of that, make sure you go to the email in the description. Reach out to me at that email, and I'll make sure to include whoever reaches out to that email on the list of bonus material that I send out. So last week I had List, I had Zalatoris. Fortunately, I had top fade of Sam Burns. That helped out a lot. But my best pivot also missed the cut. So, take the good and the bad. So short course metrics here. We looked at strokes gained total, just as an overhead. I want to look at approach shots, strokes gained approach on short courses. So the best on strokes gained approach on short courses: Daniel Berger, Stuart Sink, Kyle Stanley, Russell Knox, and Cameron Percy, followed by Lucas Glover, Adam Svensson, Dylan Wu, Cameron Tringali, and Justin Rose. Interesting names here. Berger, anything with strokes gained approach, Daniel Berger is going to be at or near the top. Tringali is starting to play well. He was very good last week at the Farmers. Justin Rose, I mentioned last week at Justin Rose that it seems like his, certainly not the old Justin Rose that contended seemingly every week, but flashes of the old form, which is an elite player in the world. It looked like flashes were coming back in the fall, and I was always hesitant. I'm always stressing that, give me a sustained run of success here. And again, this is only on short courses, but look at this prior form here. Going back to the fall, you've got the CJ Cup. Granted, it's a no-cut event, so he didn't play it well. Made the cut at Mayakoba to a middling-ish finish. Then you have a top 15. The Amex was, pretty good. He could not drive the ball, which honestly he's, basically field average. So to lose 1.5 is a little bit of an outlier. Around the green, same thing. And then last week at the Farmers. So it looks like some of the form's coming back on Justin Rose. I'm cautiously willing to dip my toe in. We'll put it that way. But still, he is consistently best strokes, or one of the best strokes gained approach on these short courses. Let's kind of look at a strokes gained total metric. I believe we did this last night, but we'll recap it here. Best stroke gained total on short courses: Seamus Power, Patrick Cantlay, Maverick McNeely, Cameron Tringali, and Tom Hoagie are your top 5, followed by Berger, Hoffman, Hughes, Sink, and Rose again, and McCarthy's actually, so there's 11 there. Yeah, I appreciate it, Josh. Like I said, anyone who wants to reach out to that, I won't guarantee wins. I won't tell you that I'm a successful DFS player every week, because I'm not. But last week was a pretty good week. I'm pretty proud of last week. So that's the short course. Again, I have not checked anything with the wind. We will do that Wednesday at the DFS Tactics show. But I think that's all I'm going to do for the recap, and only because there is a lot to get into, and we kind of went different areas last night. Didn't know really where to start. We just kind of fumbled through 2021 and kind of took a look and see what kind of the metrics were important. through the research that I did today, there were a few things that stood out. Strokes gained approach, everyone knows I have a bias towards, so it's just the type of player I prefer. Generally speaking, ball striking, which is off the tee, and approach, I just value approach more, is indicative of long-term success. So with that, I'm always going to favor strokes gained approach. But let's go to these leaderboards. And I want you to notice a few things here. Even though Pebble Beach is a short course, off the tee is going to matter. You see here in 2021, Johnny Vegas, who is great off the tee, he had a somewhat of a clunker finish. He made the cut. But I want you to see how very important it was to at least the top of the leaderboard last year. So you had a top 30, a third, a second, 2 top 15s, the winner, top 25, top 35, 10, 35, 5. There was a lot of correlation, surprisingly, to off the tee, at least last year. So we go to 2020. Is it more of the same? Well, we go to strokes gained. Tee. Not necessarily as high with the upper tier finishes, but you don't have the clunker, especially at the top. A top 20, runner-up top 20, top 15, top 15, top 20, top 20. So off the tee looks like it's going to be fairly important here at Pebble Beach, or at least at this tournament, which is surprising considering the length of the course, which is short. Again, 2019, this one's probably the least correlating, but you still have to come down to the top, what is this, maybe 11th, 12th, before you have a miss the cut, and then you have a run of success again down here right under it. So that is one thing that I certainly noticed this week, or today, excuse me, that is going to factor in this week. Absolutely. Whereas putting actually didn't play a whole lot. And I will bring up Excel at the end of the show to kind of back this up. You see here, it looks like it would be very important. 2021 was okay. You had a lot of top finishes, but you also have a miscut here, a clunker of a made cut, miscut. So putting was all or nothing, really. You either finished very high or missed the cut. That was 2021. You go to 2020. Strokes gained. Again, the putting, you got a top, a large number here, but you're going to say that about any tournament winner. This one's quite a bit higher, to be fair. You still had a middling finish, top 35. So 2020 was more important than 2021. Putting is not as indicative of success here that I think a lot of people might think because of the small greens. It's certainly the strokes gained approach, and it's going to be the greens in regulation. Absolutely, the greens in regulation. So this is last year's tournament when Dana Berger won. Your top 5, third, 7th, winner, runner-up, and the top 20. You have to come all the way down here to know to get a miscut. 2020 was more of the same. Fairways, greens in regulation. Yep. So take a look at also these leaderboards. For the guys who are negative, at least at the upper tier, negative 0.7, negative 0.5 is not much. Now, apparently Peter Monotti didn't hit a green all day. J.B. Holmes apparently didn't hit a green all day. So those two, they must have either put the lights out, drove it well, did something. Because those two are certainly outliers, but then you have such a run of success here, as well as these. 2021 I know was very, very indicative. I mean, look at the 4 here of the guys that finished. We'll be generous and say top 25 here for Pat Perez. Of the guys that finished negative, you have a negative 0.5, a negative 0.5, negative 1.5, and a 2.5, surrounded by numbers like 10s, 8s, 5s. So greens are going to matter a lot, and that kind of makes some sense with the very small greens. If you're hitting them in regulation, you're giving yourself a great chance at birdie. Let's see, something else that I noticed today when we had some discussion last week, where my normal inclination on a difficult course, especially Torrey Pines at the Farmers, my default is to go to bogeys avoided. You just want to scramble for your pars and all that. But during the research in the week, it actually it behooved you to pay attention to birdies on difficult courses. And fortunately, we put 5% in both categories, and it played out that way. That was, some of the reason list rose to such a high ranking in my data model. So this week, birdies are somewhat important, but the bogeys are even more. Look at all these top 10s in here. This is from last year, and Trillman's a top 15. Whereas the birdies, you have some top 10s, but you also have a 14th, a 21st. Come down here, clunkers. And the best way to formulate that, you see here like Berger, he only gained 1, birdies gained 1, bogeys avoided 8. 4.3 to 5.6, 5.3 to 5.6. And also you just look at the negatives. Like this is a great example. Bogeys avoided. You got to come down here. Cameron Davis, 14th. It's listed as red. It is slightly under field average. Furyk, slightly under field average. Whereas Streelman's a -1 in the birdies. You have a -2, 1.7, 2.7. So at least last year, avoiding bogeys was more important than birdies gained. And that is the trend that I saw year over year at this course, at this tournament. You can see here again, lots of green up here, which is normally going to happen. But once you get past the upper echelon, 0.1 to 2.7 for bogeys, 0.9 to 7.6, 2.9 to 5.6, all that. And then, one outlier performance here of J.B. Holmes. So they're both important. I am definitely going to be looking at bogeys more than birdies. I haven't decided or thought about my data model yet. If I do birdies gained on difficult courses, it's definitely going to be only at 5%, where bogeys would be 10. I know bogeys avoided will be in the data model. I'm not sure this one will be. If it is, it's at 5%. No. The winning score here normally is 18 to 19, and that is all from the two kind of alternate courses. The Spyglass Hill and the Monterey Peninsula. Those two are very, very easy. Whereas at the American Express, even though it's a Pete Dye design, the stadium course generally plays easy. Pebble Beach does not. Pebble Beach is generally average to difficult. So the cut line normally, and we cover this in the breakdown, like the cut line has generally been around -5 the past few years. Sometimes it'll play tougher and stuff. So most of the time, the leader after the third round is probably around 14 or 15, and the winners get to 18 or 19. This is 2020, excuse me, 2021, Berger went -18, and you can tell that he probably played Pebble Beach on day 3. because all of these are par 72. So he was 11 under going into Sunday, shot a 65. Let's see, McNeely was quick math, 3, 6, 4, 10 under. So that's what it's going to be for most guys that are in contention. But I mean, you see here, like -8, 7, that gives you in the top 25, top 30. It is not a birdie fest. It is not a Sanderson Farms. It's not a Sony. It's definitely not Kapalua. The tournament generally plays average. It will play on the easier side of average, but it's generally average. And again, that's all in 2 courses, basically. So we were looking at birdies and bogeys. So bogeys right now is my more concentrated. Definitely looking at greens. We were also looking at all of the pars, the 3s, the 4s, and the 5s. And the majority of the par 4s at Pebble Beach are from 350 to 450. Yeah, of course, Josh. This is what we're here for. I mean, you're talking to somebody who loves the analytics. So anytime you allow me to get into the data like we are tonight, I'm a kid in a candy store. Yes, I know, math nerd. It's just what I enjoy. We noticed that from the breakdown last night, most of the holes, par 4s here are from 350 to 450, with the majority between 400 and 450. And I went and looked today, and there was a lot more striking differentiation between the two. 350 to 400 generally played out more than the 400 to 450. This was last year's. We covered last year's. But you have a pretty high success rate other than this, Chris Baker who missed the cut. Whereas in the 400 to 450, you had a lot more middling finishes. And maybe that was just 1 year, but it wasn't. So 2020. Now this looks like an outlier, but you see all these negatives here. It's -0.5, -1/3. You had Harold Varner, who played really well on the 350 to 400s, but apparently didn't do much else. But around him, some pretty high success rate. Whereas 400 to 450, you still got some more. You have your guys who made the cut, but a lot more higher finishes. Again, those middling finishes, those clunker of made cut finishes. Top 3 most important stats this week. I think we'll probably get into it. I'm still honestly narrowing it down. There are a few factors. Top 3 might be interesting to think about, though. Normally it would be strokes gained approach as number 1, hands down, but that's not the case this week. Let's see. In 2019, the par 4s, 350s. So again, it looks like it's 400 to 450, but I want you to notice how little the negatives are here. So 350 to 400, a little bit more middling of a finish, whereas 400 to 450, you've got a lot of miscuts that made it to the top. And again, I'll back this up when we move to the Excel portion of the show, but the bottom line is with the par 4s and the strokes gained par 4, I think that's going to be easily one of the 3, just because the strokes gained par 4 is the most important metric on the PGA Tour. Probably should be no surprise. It's 70% of the holes at least are par 4s. And that's pretty much across courses. Most guys who perform well, are high in the strokes gained par 4s. But the bottom line, of the research that I saw today, the 350 to 400 was more important than the 400 to 450, even though more of the par 4s fall in this range. At least that's what I have seen so far. Another thing we wanted to look at was par 5s. So in the breakdown again last night, we noticed how these are top 10 finishers. Strokes gained par 5 outweighed here. And then you went to the top finishers in the top 5. It gets even more stark. Winners gets even heavier. Or, a little roughly the same, but more raw number here. So definitely looking at something of strokes gained par 5. And if we look at the par 5s, there is a stark contrast between the lengths of the par 5. So you have the 500, 0 to 500, you have the 500 to 550, and then very few longer than 550. And the way that played out is generally true as well. Let's go back to 2021. Let's do par 5s. So you notice here that last year there were no 0 to 500s. None. So you only had 500 and above. Look at the green here, and you notice in the 500 to 550 category, you've got one couple of, so 2 in the top 20 that were negative from 500 to 550, and they were marginally negative. You have quite a few in the 550 to 600. Yes, they were marginal, but you have more of them. So it leads you to say, look at this run of top 10 finishes. The top 6 performers on par 5s, 500 to 550, all finished in the top 10 last year. So that's a pretty important one. I can't say that it's top 3, but that's a very important one so far. Whereas you look at 550 to 600, still somewhat important, but not nearly as much as what you just saw in the 500 to 550. Maybe that's an outlier year. We'll check 2020, par 5. Again, you see how important the par 5s are here at Pebble Beach, or at least this tournament. I keep saying at Pebble Beach, the tournament, the Pro-Am. Only 2 players negative in the top, 30-ish are negative in the par 5s. Again, you have a lot more red in the 550 to 600. So when you sort, this says it all. This says what you need here for the 500 550s. Winner was the leader in par 5s of the range. So in order, 1st, 4th, 2nd, 3rd, 5th, 5th. That sounds pretty strong correlating to me. So 500 to 550 is very, very important this week. We'll definitely be looking at that. Absolutely. I'm going to go one more year. But if 2020 didn't prove it, I don't know what will. Again, you've got more negatives in the 550 to 600. Now, all of the par 5s are still very important. I'm not discounting these at all. But when you go from, if you're trying to differentiate between the 2 ranges, it is quite stark. You do have a clunker here in 2019, but then 3rd, 1st, 4th, top 10. Yeah, it's pretty startling. Proximity. This one was interesting only because we saw how much of it's almost double the tier average of what the amount of approach shots coming between 100 and 125. Now, sometimes that can be a bit misleading. Just because the majority of the approach shots here come from here doesn't mean necessarily it leads to a correlating result on the leaderboard. It kind of does here this week, 100 to 125. So this was 2019, just for reference. You still had quite a bit in the negative, but you also had some high finishes. So there's 2019. It's kind of all or nothing, kind of like the putting. 2020, you go to proximity, 100 to 125. Again, you have your cut makers, but nothing astronomically high. And then 2021, probably more of the same, 100 to 125. Again, now you've got a few of the top finishers in here, rattled or mixed in. You still have your clunker of made cuts, but for proximities, this is actually, when you find a decent run of cut makers, that's saying something. Because they're generally not that important. There will be some weight put into the 100 to 125. I did the 200 last week for Torrey Pines. I only put it at 5%. It did play a little bit just because of the amount of long irons that came in, or that are, just that happen at those courses. So 100 to 125 is somewhat important. But let's go back to the home page here. We've covered a few things, so let's start with birdies and bogeys. That's a good place to start. We'll just go down the list. Make sure none of the filters are on, if I could speak English. Scoring relative to par. I definitely want to put difficult on here for Pebble Beach. Now, Monterey, Spyglass, it's not going to matter half the tournament, but I'm focused on the guys who are going to play Sunday. These are your outright win bets more than likely, or your DFS, winners. So let's look at, and these are difficult courses. I've put the last 6 months. That's only 11. Yeah, I'm going to have to broaden that out to 12. My screen keeps flashing. I hope it's not for you all. Last 12 months. The best guys to avoid bogeys. Sorry, this is Yeah, okay, something's going on here. Let's minimize and maximize. Maybe that's not helping. I apologize. I'm having some technical difficulties. Well, let's reset this. Let's go to birdies and bogeys. We wanted difficult scoring. We'll bring this out to the last 12 months and the last 36 rounds. I'm sorry, that was really weird that I was doing. Your top 10 bogey avoiders on difficult courses. Cameron Tringale, Patrick Cantlay, Daniel Berger, Jordan Spieth, and Aaron Rai are your top 5, followed by Russell Knox, Brian Harman, Kevin Streelman, Alex Smalley, Wyndham Clark, and Michael Thompson. Clark and Thompson being tied for 10th. So probably no surprise here at the top. Tringale, Cantlay, Berger, Spieth. You don't think of Tringale as elite, but he's pretty darn good. The metrics usually, the metrics say he's a lot better player than what he performs. It's surprising he hasn't won yet. A lot of people think he will win this year eventually. But Cantlay, Berger, Spieth, Aaron Rai is a very, very, very good player that a lot of people don't know about. He won the Scottish Open 2 years ago, the week before the British Open. I mean, this guy can play. He might be weird with, wearing 2 gloves and have iron covers, but the guy can play. So those are your top bogey avoiders. And I mentioned him last week. He was a part of a lot of my DFS lineups. Don't sleep on Kevin Streelman. He plays this tournament very, very well. Not to mention that he doesn't get enough credit for how good he is at difficult courses. He's generally at his best when it's difficult. Generally at his best when it's windy, which Pebble Beach can get windy. He does it in ways that don't pop on my data models, but you can't ignore the success here on these difficult courses. The Farmers. Now granted, it's a middling finish, but a lot of people don't think of Kevin Streelman on difficult courses. The Open, tied for top 20. U.S. Open, top 15. Memorial's always tough. Top 15, top 10 the PGA. This guy can play on difficult courses. So don't sleep on Kevin Streelman. I haven't seen the DK prices yet. I know they're out there. I keep the basic up for the data dive, and then I use the DraftKings salaries on the DFS Tactics show, obviously. But those are your top 10 bogey avoiders for difficult courses. So we're going to take that off, and now I'm going to go switch views here, and let's go to Fairways and Greens, and I'm going to do both I want the last 6 months here. Let's see who the best players at just hitting the greens are in regulation. Just flat out. Make sure no other filters are on. Okay. Top 10 greens in regulation the past 6 months. Will Zalatoris, Russell Knox, Patrick Cantlay, Mito Pereira, and Nick Watney are your top 5, followed by Rogers, Hadwin, Glover, Kyle Stanley, Tyler Duncan, and Seamus Power. Important. To your question, Josh, I would, if I had to choose right now, I would think par 4s and greens in regulation gained are going to be 2 of the 3. I don't want it to be set in stone, but that's my initial inclination. This one's pretty darn important. So those are your top, 10, 11 guys. Greens in regulation gained just anytime. Let's add the difficulty, or the difficult filter, because that can change quite a bit. Part of the who plays difficult courses well. I do have to expand this out to 12 months. It keeps flashing again. Top 10 greens in regulation on difficult courses. Cantlay, Knox has been popping a lot. Daniel Berger, Lee Biota, Aaron Rai are your top 5. Streelman, Spieth, Zalatoris, Seamus Power, Alex Smalley. So good stuff there. Let's look at, we looked at par 4s. So par 4s, 300 to 350, or 350 to 400, excuse me. I do want to take the difficulty on. I just want to look at who plays the lengths of these par 4s well. I don't usually add easy or difficult or anything to that effect on specific lengths of holes. So the top 10 guys in the past, let's do 6 months, and it is, for whatever reason, this is bugging out. So let me reload this. I really hope you all aren't seeing that on your end. If you are, I apologize. I don't know what's going on with my stuff tonight. Last 6 months, 36 rounds. Okay, your top 10 performers on par 4s of 350 to 400. Mac Hughes, Justin Rose, Patrick Cantlay, Will Zalatoris, and Keith Mitchell are your top 5, followed by Josh Creel, Lanto Griffin, Joel Damon, Taylor Moore, Seamus Power, and Troy Merritt. So Power's popped quite a bit now. Zalatoris, obviously. Cantlay, obviously. Merritt's been up there a couple times. So that's interesting to note. And then lastly, let's look at par 5s. Both the par 5s and the 500 to 550. So your best par 5 guys are Cantlay, Power, McNeely, Gligic, Hahn, Mitchell, Tringali, Stroud, Fitzpatrick, and Brian Gay. First time we've mentioned Matthew Fitzpatrick, or Matt Fitzpatrick as he prefers to be called now. But you got Tringali, McNeely, Power, Cantlay. Now we'll look at the 500 to 550. You go McNeely, Cantlay, Gligic, David Lingmerth, and there's a name for you. Champ, Rose, Power, Dylan Wu, Brian Gay, and Pat Perez. So, good stuff there. Let me switch over to Microsoft Excel, and I will begin to show you what I was looking at this week. We saw some of this last night, but let's bring this up. So, Pebble Beach. It looks like nothing is starkly important, so I think the first way to look at that is here. So this chart right here is telling you that strokes gained off the tee is generally 18.5% less important than the average tour event. And we've noticed how important it kind of was in the leaderboard. So what I did today, and this is where I get to show off, I really am a math nerd, is this fancy thing here. Anything in red is an outlier. And it was an outlier in a good way. So 2021, putting was actually very important. Generally, it's not. Driving distance was very important in 2017. Generally, it's not. Where it does come into play are these ones highlighted in blue. These are outliers that were high. So the average of these, or the difference between the lowest and the highest between these 5 years is 12.8. If you took out the outlier year, it then becomes 9 with an average of 39. And that's pretty darn important. Again, this number, the lower the better, or the more correlating success. Par 3s with a 42. 350 to 400 par 4s. If you take out the outlier, it's now 4.17 difference between the min and the max at a 45 importance factor. The reason why I am preferring this, I want to see metrics that are consistent year over year in the matter of importance. Then preferably the lower the number. But I definitely want to see things that are consistent. So par 5s here. Sorry, let me scroll over for you. Par 5s. There's a difference between seven spots difference between the minimum and the maximum. That's a very, very consistent metric that plays at Pebble Beach Pro-Am. I mentioned the greens, 6 here at the bogeys. So that's what I was doing all day today, was trying to find the outliers in these years, year over year. And what I have been able to find, this will answer your question, Josh, basically in a very color-coded math nerd way, is, to me, at least data-wise, it looks like greens at 39, strokes gained par 4 at 26.5. What's the third? The third, I'm tempted to say bogeys avoided, but I don't think that's going to be the case. Honestly, I think it's probably the par 5s. You could argue the par 5s 500 to 550 because most of the par 5s are of that length. But I think it's just par 5s. So the reason I had made this spreadsheet again was to come back to here, and you notice that, say bogeys avoided here at Pebble Beach generally is 9% less important than the average tour event. But when you account for the the outliers, it comes a lot better. So let's look at a good outlier, or one that increased, like these greens here. Let's look at greens. So this, where's it at? There it is. So greens in regulation at Pebble, you take out that outlier, it's going to be a lot lower. It'll be a lot lower. And what all this is getting to is this right here, which is what I have been doing the past couple of weeks, and people really, really enjoy it. So this is ranked by average finish here at the Pebble Beach Pro-Am tournament. So you see here, Daniel Berger's played this event twice with an average finish of 3rd. He's got a win and a tie for 5th. Jason Day, 5 events, averages a 4th place finish. So now that we've seen what metrics we think will play, at least in some form or fashion, here at Pebble Beach, let's start sorting this. We first looked at greens in regulation. So let's sort this by greens in regulation. And again, this is performance just at this tournament. Just at this tournament. So I will probably not these two have played it just once, so take it with a grain of salt. But guys like Joseph Brandlich, who's played it twice, Russell Knox, who's played it 4 times. There's Kevin Streelman, 5 times in the past 5 years. Averages a top 10 finish. He's very high on the greens and regulation list. Berger Cantlay, 4 times, averages a top 25. He's high on the greens and regulation. Scott Stallings we looked at quite a bit last night. So there's some of the guys that are in the top 10, 15 of greens and regulation, which I think, hey, Merck, good to see you, man. Hopefully you didn't get Connors from me, but if you did, that's one I'm going to own, that he was my best pivot, and, he pivoted it into nothingness. He was bad. I thought Connors would play well last week, and he didn't. So you and me both on that one, Merck. But otherwise, my DFS was pretty good. So there's the guys that are fairly good at the greens. Let's look at the par 5s, and particularly the length of the par 5s. But let's start with par 5s, because those are going to be so astronomically important here at Pebble Beach. Same here, Merck. I thought he was too. Fortunately, I faded Sam Burns, and I think a lot of people were on him. I faded him and Finau. I thought Finau was going to play good or play well. I faded him because of the ownership, and it worked in my favor. If he would have played well, I'd have lost. He didn't play well. He missed the cut. So, strokes gained par 5 here at this event. Jason Day. Oh, goodness gracious. That's when you get all off kilter. Par 5s. Jason Day. Ryan Moore, he's only played it 1 time. There's Wyndham Clark, so he's now popped on the putting metrics, and now he's popped on the par 5. So that's an interesting name to take a look at for Wednesday in the DFS. Wyndham Clark. That's some recipe for success there. Vincent Whaley, Matt Kuchar, Kitayama, and it's only 1 event. Champ, McNeely, Streelman, these are your regular expected performers here at Pebble Beach. Nick Taylor, former champion. Let's actually sort this now by the 550 to 600 and see, or I'm sorry, the 500 to 550, I think. Now I'm going to have to go back to, let's see, I can tell you here. Not that one, it's this one. No, yes. 500 to 550. I have lost my damn mind. Tringali. So, Birdie Fest, again, another viewer asked that same question earlier. I don't think so, only because half the rounds will be at Pebble Beach. Now, yes, the 2 alternate courses are very, very easy. But the cut line's really only -5, -6, because guys still have to play Pebble Beach. Daniel Berger last year won. He was -11 at the cut. He just played extremely well at Pebble Beach on Sunday. But the day before, he shot even par, assumingly, at Pebble Beach. So 18 or 19 is generally the winning score here. We looked at 2021's leaderboard. I mean, -8, -9 got you in the top 30. It's not a birdie fest. It really isn't. The tournament I would classify as average difficulty, but it's certainly on the easier end of average. It's not a birdie fest. It really isn't. So the top 10 guys, on the length of the par 5s that play most important here at Pebble Beach, or Pebble Beach Pro-Am. Wyndham Clark, again. Cameron Champ, Berger, Schwartzel, Kitayama's up there twice now. Jason Day, Nick Taylor, former champ. Lucas Glover, twice. He's played this event twice with a top 30 average. There's Kuchar again. Kevin Tway, first time we've mentioned him. Gligic, one other time, somewhere in Fantasy National. Okay, good stuff. Now let's see. Let's just look at putting, because guys who generally putt well on POA, it just translates to different courses. Whereas, some guys can putt well on Bermuda some weeks and not on others. Let's look at putting at this tournament specifically. So, best putters here at the Pebble Beach Pro-Am. Lucas Glover, Vincent Whaley, Wyndham Clark, as we would expect, Schwartzel, McNeely, Druitt, although that's only been one time, Berger, Lashley, Jason Day, Tringali, there you go, Merck, Streelman, Rogers. So there's a list of a few guys who are doing it with the putter at this course. I think the last thing I kind of want to look at is off the tee, honestly. Let's see. Sort by off the tee. Top guys off the tee. So right off the bat, you notice that the highest in off the tee is like 2.2. It's not very high. It is something that I'm going to put in the data model, probably at 5%. We looked at the leaderboards from 2021 back to 2019, 2018, and off the tee was surprisingly important for this tournament. Whether that's from the other two courses, I don't really know, but it had a pretty strong correlation. So the guys that, well, look here, as someone who is keen on data, so your top performers on off the tee, they're all very little exposure, 1 and 2. So if we take this down and filter on the guys who have played, say, 3, 4, or all 5 years in the past 5 years, Mullinax, look at that, Trey Mullinax. 3 events, not a missed cut, averages a top 30 finish. He's going to be in the low 6s for price. That's interesting. That's very interesting. Charlie Hoffman, if he hasn't withdrawn already. I haven't kept up with any field changes or anything today. I've been all in data and research. But he's he's 1 for 4 here at Pebble Beach. Interesting. Kevin Streelman loves this tournament. Joel Damon, Russell Knox, Cantley, Day, McNeely. So more of the guys that you would expect who are doing it off the tee, at least that have exposure. Let's see. Something else that I can maybe point out for you all. We looked at greens. Maybe, I can't remember if we did bogeys or not. Let's see. I'm looking at my Excel sheets just to see what is the next thing or possibly something else I can cover. Like I said, guys, if you want to jump in chat or just tell me about last week, how you did last week, any bets that you're thinking about this week. Mark, you mentioned Tringali. I haven't seen his odds yet. Are they decent? Or any guys that you're looking at for DFS or early thoughts? Tell me what you're thinking there. So I'll give it, like I said, I'll give it a couple of minutes here for any questions that you all have. But really, most of the metrics tonight have been, Daniel Berger, Streelman has popped quite a bit. Russell Knox has actually popped a lot tonight. Pick a winner. Okay. All right. Well, let me go back to Fantasy National, and let me get a full view of the field here. Strokes gained. It's funny that you mentioned that, Josh, because that is actually one thing that I do in the bonus content. I give 3 bets that I would think about making this week, and then I do a DFS portion as well in the what I call the tournament fact sheet that I send out every week to the people who have reached out to that email. Favorite highest owned golfer and favorite lowest owned golfer. That'll be done Wednesday for sure. I don't have much of the ownership projections right now. But to pick a winner, I think the most logical choice would probably be Patrick Cantlay. So instead of going Patrick Cantlay, because I don't want to go pure chalk, I'm going to throw a name out there. I'm going to say Mito Pereira. And the reason I like Mito, is that generally he plays shorter courses well. I mean, you see the strokes gained approach here. I mean, he is very, very good. That was the ice in the water, sorry. Very, very good on his approaches. Yeah, Mito and Tringali. It kind of depends on the ownership, really, because I imagine Mito is probably going to be fairly popular. If you're meaning Mito as the highest and lowest owned, yeah, absolutely. Tringali was so low owned in DFS last week. That's also another reason why I had such success, because I had a lot of Tringali last week. But I like Mito this week. I'm only picking this not to be chalky on Patrick Cantlay, but don't sleep on Mito this week either. Like I said, I've scrolled a couple times, but he plays well on putts well on POA. If it does get windy, which I have not looked at yet, he's okay in the wind, great in the wind actually. He does generally, or at least he has in his PGA Tour career, struggled when it was difficult. That is one reason that gives me pause. But Tringali, he was such a fantastic option last week. I mean, yeah, kudos to everybody that used him. I used him. I think he was 8th or 10th in my data rankings. I liked Tringali quite a bit last week. Is course history a big factor this week? I don't. So when somebody asks that, I don't usually know how to answer that, because I go back 5 years, and I only go back 5 years because guys change, you know. Like look at DeChambeau he's always been a good, driver. But 2 or 3 years ago, he basically changed the game when all he did was chase distance. Some guys, drastically improve with their irons or whatnot. So that's why I limit myself to going back just 5 years. It also helps me avoid narratives, if that makes sense. This guy played well in 2016. He knows the course and stuff. That's why I really have made this spreadsheet here. So this is sorted by average finish. Oh, I wanted lowest. Sorry. Okay. Is course history? Yeah, to a little bit. Like Kevin Streelman. The Pebble Beach generally plays difficult. He plays difficult courses well, and he's had a lot of success here. Like somebody like Charles Schwartzel. I'm not going to discount this, but it's only one time, and he finished 5th. Like Streelman's played this event every year the past 5 years, and has averaged a top 10 finish. That's fantastic. Like this is weighted so much more than this. Jordan Spieth, 5 events, averages a top 20. Patrick Cantlay, 4 events, top 25 average finish. So I think knowledge of Pebble Beach will be helpful, yes. Especially prior course performance in certain metrics, really. Like Daniel Berger here. The fact that he's done a lot of his damage around the green kind of gives me pause on him. Now, of course, he's always a great iron player. Actually, Berger doesn't do birdies here very well. He just avoids the bogeys. So, but you come over here and you look at the 350 to 400 par fours, which is the best, or the more correlating par four range. It's very good. I'm definitely going to be looking at guys who hit their irons putting, especially at this tournament because it's POA. You have essentially 4 courses on the PGA Rota that are POA. You have the Farmers, you have the Pebble Beach Pro-Am, you have the Genesis. Those 3 really stand out. And then from there, it's kind of hit and miss. Some places are classified as POA one year, and then another year they're bent. It all depends on the overseeding and stuff, which, again, I'm not an agronomist, so I don't understand that at all. But those 3 courses, along with another one, I think it's TBC River Highlands, which is really random. But those three courses all have POA. It's no surprise, too, that they're all in the same area of the calendar or same time frame of the calendar. So I'm really going to look at putting specifically at this event as a indicator for prior course performance for sure. I know that's a long-winded answer for you, Josh. I don't know how to answer that very well, but I think it's a positive as well, because again, I don't have the scar tissue or the knowledge of in 2012 or like 2012 and 2014 this guy won twice. Like, that's 7 to 8, 10 years ago. I mean, like I said, guys change. So I will try to sum it up by saying a little to maybe a moderate amount depending on the statistic. That sounds like a cop-out answer. It might be a little bit, but I don't want to lie to you because I don't know. I don't know. And if I don't know something, I'll admit that I don't know it. We've run a little over tonight, guys. I really appreciate the interaction here. It's been fun. But thanks for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. This is one of the more fun shows that I do because I get to show off my nerd. And the DFS Tactics will be Wednesday night to finalize our lineups and such and finish our bets. I kind of want to hear who you've bet this week as well, if you're going to make any bets. Coming off the win, Charles is 7-1 on DK. It's not that I'm off of him. It's more of a fact that it's just one time. There's not enough data there to say that he's great at this course. It's just 1 year. I didn't see him pop a lot, at least going off memory tonight. I didn't see him pop a lot on some of the metrics that we looked at. It'll all kind of depend on Wednesday night and the data model, which I'll work on pretty heavily tomorrow. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think so. Yeah, I appreciate it, Josh. I really do appreciate that. I have fun doing this. I hope you all enjoy it. So make sure to tune in for Wednesday night. I almost said Friday night. Tune in Wednesday night for the DFS Tactics show. Reach out to me in that email in the description if you want to be part of the bonus content that I send out to my subscribers. It's where I was hammering Luke List. I mentioned Will Zalatoris. I faded Sam Burns. I told you to pivot to Corey Connors too. So, but anyway, again, great show. I had fun, guys. For any bets that you have made so far at the Pebble Beach Pro-Am, for any bets that you're thinking about making at the Pebble Beach Pro-Am, until I see you Wednesday night at the DFS Tactics show, may all your bets be profitable.